Good afternoon, folks. As I am not from Florida, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Abraham Lincoln. It is an honor to once again be among the patriotic souls at rest here in Sarasota's National Cemetery. As we celebrate the Stars and Stripes on this auspicious occasion, let us remember the words of my second inaugural address. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your words are as important today as they were in 1861 on the eve of the Civil War. Welcome to the second performance of Celebrating the Stars and Stripes with our own Pops Orchestra and Vane Scott III, the first being 5 years ago. I am Brian McCarthy, and it's my honor to be your Master of Ceremonies today. I'm a past president of the Military Officers Association of Sarasota and executive director of the Sarasota Military Officers Foundation, the organizers of this patriotic event today. Before we get started, a few housekeeping issues. For the soldiers and airmen in the audience, latrines are located to my left. For the sailors, Marines, and Coasties in attendance, heads are located to starboard. For everyone else, porta potties are available to my left and right. We have Sarasota County's EMTs available should there be a medical emergency. If you require assistance, ushers can be identified by their name tags. Golf carts are available to assist you back to your autos should you require transportation. It is my privilege now to first recognize our sponsors for this event. To hold an event such as this requires the participation of many patriots in our community. First, the Patterson Foundation. In January 10 years ago, the Patterson Foundation launched its legacy initiatives honoring Dorothy Patterson and the Patterson family. The Patterson Foundation has impacted our community ever since, not the least of which is this beautiful 2,800-seat amphitheater here at Patriot Plaza. What could be more fitting than to celebrate the Stars and Stripes here today on the Patterson Foundation's 10th anniversary? My thanks to the Zenith Insurance Company for their sponsorship and for reprinting 20,000 copies of the Old Glory brochure you received when you entered the amphitheater. They have been a stalwart supporter for our event today. The Sarasota Magazine for their promotion of the event and distributing 13,000 copies of Old Glory brochure in their magazine. The brochure is a component of our American Flag initiative, a 10-lesson elementary school educational plan the Sarasota Military Officers Foundation developed in partnership with the Patterson Foundation and the Sarasota County School Board. No less important to our founding sponsor are our Patriot sponsors, the Community Foundation of Sarasota County, Military Officers Association of America Foundation, Veteran Air Heating and Air Condition, United Way Suncoast Mission United Initiative, supporting the 88,000 veterans in our community, and our Minutemen sponsor, Tidewell Hospice, the Pops Orchestra, and Freeman Design Group. If you'd please now stand and remain standing for the presentation of the colors, the Pledge of Allegiance, and our national anthem. Sergeant Antoine, United States Marine Corps, post the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ladies and gentlemen, please join Lauren Nielsen and the Pops Orchestra in the singing of our national anthem.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we
Sergeant Antoine, retire the colors. President's Day, as it's commonly called, is traditionally celebrated. Oh, please sit down. You get very tired standing up through this entire performance. President's Day, Robin has to remain standing. Celebrated on the third Monday every February. It was originally established by Congress in 1880 to honor General George Washington, and later to include Abraham Lincoln. Their birthdays are just 10 days apart. It was also the first federal holiday to honor an American citizen. The federal holiday, Washington's birthday, honors the accomplishments of the first president of the United States, the father of our country. Before he became president, he played important roles in the military, leading the American Continental Army to victory over the British in 1783. Celebrated for his leadership in the founding of the nation, he was the Electoral College's unanimous choice to become the first president. He was seen as a unifying force for the new republic and set an example for all future office holders. You may not know that General Washington created the first military badge of merit for the common soldier. Revived on Washington's 200th birthday in 1932, the Purple Heart Medal, which bears Washington's image, is awarded to soldiers who are injured in battle. As with Memorial Day and Veterans Day, Washington Birthday offers another opportunity to honor the country's veterans. I ask all recipients of the Purple Heart who are here with us today to stand and be recognized. Abraham Lincoln was our 16th president and the first to be assassinated. He successfully led the United States through its greatest constitutional, military, and moral crisis, the American Civil War, which preserved our Union. Lincoln was a hands-on commander-in-chief. He closely supervised the war effort, painstakingly monitored the telegraphic reports coming into the War Department. He kept close tabs on all phases of the military effort, consulted with governors, and selected generals based on their past success. In terms of war strategy, Lincoln articulated just two priorities: ensure that Washington was well defended, to conduct an aggressive war to satisfy a decisive victory. It is appropriate to honor these two Americans today who have preserved during adversity and brought us through some of our most difficult times. Today, there is much derisiveness, rancor, and political gridlock in Washington. When I get discouraged, I'm reminded of these two American heroes, along with the men and women of our armed forces who are serving, continuing the legacy of those who fought in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Before we start our performance, I would like to introduce Vane Scott III. Vane is a seventh-generation native of Newcomerstown, Ohio, and a direct descendant of the Mulvane family, one of Ohio's very first white settlers, having settled there in 1801. Vane is a U.S. Navy veteran, having served aboard the USS Claude V. Ricketts, DDG-5, and the USS Johnston, DD-821. Vane grew up surrounded by the red, white, and blue in the American flag, with his parents owning Great Scott Displays, one of the country's largest over-the-road float builders and decorating companies in the 1960s. Great Scott Displays decorated Washington, D.C. for President Eisenhower's second inauguration and decorated and built floats for 2 Miss America pageants and countless parades, fairs, and celebrations across the country. The Scotts started the Colonial Flag Company in 1968, which is now the Annan Flag Company, the largest flag company in the world and one of the oldest in America, dating back to 1847. Vane joined the flag company while still in high school and then rejoined after his military service. He traveled with his father, crisscrossing the United States, performing The Many Faces of Old Glory. Vane's father wrote the script for The Many Faces of Glory in 1975 and was on the road performing it for over 33 years. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let us celebrate the Stars and Stripes. Founders to speak once again to remind everyone of how our country was founded and how our flag became to be. You might think it's going to be boring, but it's not. You may think it's unimportant, but it is. You may think it does not concern you, but it does. You may think you don't owe this country anything, but you do. Think about that again. After you've seen the show, listen to these words from the past and know without them, you could not hardly be here today. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Listen to the voices from the past. Taxation without representation is tyranny. James Otis, 1770. Give me liberty or give me death. Patrick Henry, 1775. If they want to have a war, let it begin here. Captain John Parker at the Battle of Lexington, April 1775. Don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes. Israel Putnam, Bunker Hill. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson, July 4th, 1776. I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. Nathan Hale. These are the times that try men's souls. Thomas Paine. I have not yet begun to fight. John Paul Jones. Where liberty dwells, there is my country. Benjamin Franklin. Eternal vigilance is the price for liberty. John Curran. To be prepared for one of the most effectual means of preserving peace. George Washington. Don't give up the ship. Captain James Lawrence. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light, Francis Scott Key. We have given them a near-perfect union, but will they keep it? Or will they, in the enjoyment of the material abundance we have given them, lose the memory of freedom? Thomas Jefferson. This nation will remain the land of the free only so long as it is a home of the brave. Elmer Davis, American journalist. Our great modern republic, may those who seek the blessings of its institutions and the protection of its flag remember the obligations they impose. Ulysses S. Grant. I am an American. Have you ever looked into the eyes of an immigrant that has just become a new United States citizen? One who took the long and difficult journey from poverty to hopelessness, pledged their loyalty and allegiance to our flag, and now are ready to start a new life. You can see the hope, the dreams, the eagerness that lies within. Now they have a real life, one that means a future for their children that was never there for them. I am an American. We hope after you see this performance and you leave this beautiful amphitheater, you will tell your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren how important it is for them to understand why we love this country so much. After all, they are the future of America, and they must have that same eagerness to join in the American dream, or through ignorance in their own prosperity, they could lose it all. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Sarasota Military Officers Foundation, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce the Pops Orchestra of Sarasota and Bradenton under the direction of Dr. Robin Bell and Vane Scott III, who will present The Many Faces of Old Glory.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And welcome everybody to the celebration of the Stars and Stripes on President's Day. Well, it's so great to be back here in Sarasota and at this beautiful place here at Patriot Plaza. You know, I was here, a lot of you may know, and some of you don't, I was here 5 years ago and performed this show for Flag Day. You know, I'm from a little small town in Ohio called Newcomerstown, Ohio. And amazingly enough, there's only about 3,000 people in that town, about what's here. But amazingly, there are some people here from my hometown. Where are you at? Yeah, I brought my own cheering section. You know, some of those people, they winter here. They're the snowbirds like some of you. But there's also some of them that moved to this beautiful town or this area many years ago, and they now call this home. But you know, from my hometown, there are also two famous people that you may have heard of, besides me. There's Cy Young, the greatest baseball pitcher of all time. 511 wins, nobody will touch it. The other one is the Ohio State University's greatest football coach of all time, Woody Hayes. OH! Yeah, that's an Ohio State thing. Well, enough of all that. You're here for me to tell you the story of how we got our flag. But before I tell you the story of how we got our flag and how we got the United States, I'm going to tell you a short story of how another country got their flag, one you might be familiar with. Did you know that the oldest known flag that's still being used today, well, it began way back in the year 1200 when the English knights were returning home from the Crusades and, well, they were passing through the city of Genoa, Italy, and they saw pieces of cloth waving on poles all over the city. Well, they liked what they saw. What they saw was called a flag. The flag was called the Cross of St. George. Now, that's just a simple red cross on a white flag. Now, there are a lot of other countries in the world that still use this design, like Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, only in different color combinations. Well, the English, they liked this idea so well that they took it home with them, and they adopted it as the official flag of England. Well, 400 years later, there's a queen on the throne of England, Queen Elizabeth I. Well, this is still her flag, but she's fighting a different war now. Well, she's fighting Scotland. It's one of the worst wars in history, where her troops are under the Cross of St. George, but the Scots, well, they're fighting for a king, King James of Scotland. Well, he's got a cross on his flag too, but it's a little different. His is called the Cross of St. Andrew. Now, this is still a popular flag today, so if you happen to see someone flying this in their front yard, well, you'll know they're pretty proud of their Scottish ancestry. So here we have the two great armies of the world fighting this terrible war under the two crosses. Well, Queen Elizabeth I, well, she's so busy being one of the best queens England ever had, well, she never had time for romance. She could never find the right guy. And unfortunately, Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603, and she left no heirs to the throne of England. She was the last of the royal blood. But where are they going to find a relative to sit on the throne, because there's none left in England? Well, they search all around, and they find a distant cousin. But who is it? Would you believe it's the man that they're at war with, King James of Scotland? But he's the enemy. Well, they have to ask him anyway, will you be our king? Well, James is thinking, if I'm the king over both countries, that would end the war. So, in 1603, he ascended to the throne of England as James I. But the fighting didn't stop, because now they're going to fight over what flag to fly. I mean, the English, well, they want to keep the Cross of St. George. It's been their flag for 400 years. But the Scots are saying, hey, that's our king on the throne. We want to fly our flag. Well, before this gets into another war, James better do something in a hurry. And he did. You see, he figured out a way to make everybody happy. You see, all he did was put both of those crosses onto one flag. Now, this is called the King's Colors in your history books. This flag will come to North America. We'll name our first permanent settlement after this king, Jamestown. And it comes back again on the Mayflower in 1620. The King's Colors. Well, about 100 years later, there's another queen on the throne of England, Queen Anne. Well, she don't want to fly the king's colors, right? Because, well, she's the queen. So she redesigned that flag of England, and she stuck those king's colors up in the corner of her red ensign. Now, this is called the Queen Anne, or the British Red Ensign. Heck, some of the more venturesome folks called it the Red Meteor. Now, this is the flag England flew when she colonized the world. It will come to North America. George Washington will fight against this in our revolution, but it will play a very important role in the development of the flag of the United States. So remember it, because I'll show it to you again later. The Queen Anne, or the British Red Ensign. Well, to finish up this little story, about 100 years later, England took in Ireland, and they became the United Kingdom. England, Scotland, and Ireland. Well, Ireland, they've got a skinny red cross on their flag they call the Cross of St. Patrick. Somebody says, well, why don't we stick that cross on the flag with the other two crosses? So, in 1801, the flag of the United Kingdom was born. All three crosses onto one flag. See that skinny red cross? Well, that's Ireland, the Cross of St. Patrick. Now, this is still the flag of the United Kingdom today, and it's known around the world as the British Union Jack. Well, as you can tell from that story, if you're going to design your country's flag, well, you just don't sit down and draw one, right? I mean, that one took 600 years. But what about our flag? Well, there are many versions of how we got our flag and how we got the United States. I call mine the many faces of Old Glory, and you're sure going to know why when I get to the end. The people you're going to hear about and the incredible things they did. Well, it's all based on truth. For they not only gave us our flag, they gave us our country. Because you can't tell the story of how we got our flag without telling how we got the United States. Now, don't worry, folks. This isn't a history lecture this afternoon. I got some humor in some of these stories, and well, I would appreciate it if you would laugh when it's funny, like that. But I know you're going to be thrilled when it's thrilling. And there are some sad places, too. And now, the story. A moth-eaten rag on a worm-eaten pole does not seem likely to stir a man's soul. 'Tis the deeds that were done 'neath that moth-eaten rag, when the pole was a staff and the rag was a flag. The year is 1770. We have 13 colonies on the East Coast. We're occupied by King George's army. Well, we're not allowed to own military ships or military weapons. You know, we can't even train military units because we're under the thumb of the king. Well, the king, he figures out it's costing him a fortune to keep his army of occupation here. So he had what was called the Stamp Act, passed over an impartment in England where we had no vote. A heavy tax on the colonies. Boy, did we get mad about that. Taxation without representation is tyranny, we said. Well, the colonists were so mad, they rioted against the troops in Boston. 5 citizens were slain by the British soldiers in what history now calls the Boston Massacre. You know, there's a monument down at the old square in Boston, and it has the names of those very first Americans to die for the cause of freedom. And, well, we probably can't recite any of their names, but I'll tell you the name of the first man that's on that list. His name was Crispus Attucks. He was a black man. He was also an escaped slave. So honor to Crispus Attucks, one of the very first Americans to die for the cause of freedom. Now, It's 1775. We're still under the thumb of the king. But the rest of the world, well, they find out about our rich new continent. They're sending ships, we're trading, we're making lots of money. But boy, the heavy tax on the colony's tea is really boiling now. There's again calls for taxation without representation is tyranny. Well, we want to vote on our own tax money. We want to be able to spend it here on roads and bridges and schools and maybe some new voting machines here in Florida. Did you guys ever get that mess straightened out? Well, the king ignored us, so we got madder. Well, now we're forming secret societies and clubs and organizations. We're stealing guns and ammunition. There's talk of a rebellion against the king. You know, someone says we're secretly training an army in the woods. Well, now these groups, they're starting to get names like the Minutemen, the Militia, the Sons of Liberty, the Oak Ridge Boys. Or was that the Backstreet Boys? I'm just seeing if you're paying attention. But you know, you don't want to join the Sons of Liberty. Why? Because, well, those guys, they want a revolution. You see, in this point in our history, well, we really didn't want a revolution. I mean, we thought we were English, part of Mother England and proud of it. But boy, are we mad at the king over the tax. Well, now, it's April 18th, 1775, and a Boston silversmith learns that the British troops under General Gage are going to march from Charleston to Boston to Lexington. And they're going to arrest two of our greatest patriots for treason. Then they're going to go on to Concord and confiscate the guns and ammunition. Well, they found out we've got hidden there. They're going to squash the rebellion. Well, Paul Revere is about to ride into history. He and his friend, Mr. Dawes, mount up. Paul Revere stopped at the Old North Church along the way when he found out the direction, the route that the British troops were going to take. And he had a signal lantern hung up way up in the belfry so the other riders would know. And they began their ride. Well, they're pounding on every farmhouse, village, and hamlet door along the way. The regulars are marching, the regulars are marching. The British are coming. Well, when they got to Lexington, 14 miles away, they pounded on the door of Captain John Parker. Well, he's the head of the local Minutemen there, you know, and they said something like, John, they're coming to arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock for treason, and they're going to take our guns. And they rode off into the night. Well, Captain Parker, he knew what to do. His men are mad, they're ready to fight, so he sounds the alarm. And 170 men answer the call. Well, they're running out of the farms and villages and hamlets, carrying squirrel guns and pitchforks and clubs and waving the craziest looking flag you ever saw. Well, they gather on the green near the bridge. Boy, we're waving the flag. We're going to fight the army, right? Well, when he looked across the bridge, there wasn't anybody there because we had got there too quick. The British army was hours away. Well, Captain Parker, he saw his men cooling down. He goes, you men might as well just go on home because, well, they're not going to be here for a while. But when they get closer, I'll call you back. Well, that's what they did. Everyone went home. But now they got a chance to think about this dumb thing they're about to do. I mean, can you imagine going up against the king's army with a squirrel gun? I mean, these guys aren't soldiers. They're farmers and hunters and merchants, and they're going to fight a war. And it's not in a foreign land. It's going to be right in their own front yard. Well, pretty soon, it's after midnight. No one could sleep, you know. These men are tossing and turning and holding their breath to every fast horse of the night to see if that's going to be the alarm. Well, finally, at 4:30 a.m. on April 19th, 1775, Captain Parker sounds that alarm again. The men are back. The man with the flag is back. We're ready to fight the army. Well, this time, they were there. The British commander, he looked across the bridge and he saw all these mean-looking guys with their squirrel guns and their pitchforks. And he says, "Lay down those arms and step aside." Captain Parker says, "No, stand your ground, fire, if only if fired upon. But if they want to have a war, let it begin here." That didn't scare the commander. He says, "Lay down those arms in the name of the king." Well, Captain Parker looked at these men the second time, and they're trembling with fear. They're ill-equipped and ill-trained. And he looked across the bridge at the best equipped, best trained army in the world. Well, what's he going to do? Well, he's got to get them out of there. Run, retreat, retreat, take your guns with you. We'll fight another day. Well, everyone, they're all running around trying to get out of the way, and then all of a sudden, somebody pulled a trigger, and a man fell. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote a poem about that day by the rude bridge. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled. And here once the embattled farmer stood and fired the shot heard round the world. The revolution has begun. Now this is called the Bedford Flag because the man that carried it that day, well, he ran all the way from the little town of Bedford down the road just to get into the fight. His name was Nathaniel Page, and they've traced this flag back through his family's history almost 100 years before this. It's in a museum today and is considered to be one of the oldest flags in North America. The Latin on this flag means conquer or die. Some of us died that day. But we beat them. You know, we beat the King's Army there because, oh, well, we didn't fight like they did. You know, back in these days, the great armies of the world, man, were those guys dumb. You know, they would just stand in close, tight ranks and just shoot point blank at each other like ducks in a shooting gallery. They were crazy. We couldn't fight that way. We didn't have enough guns. And besides that, I'm hoping we were smarter than that. Well, we fought Indian style. We hid behind the trees and behind the rocks and in the ditches and in the houses. We picked them off all the way back to Boston. Their losses were terrible. Well, many years later, a letter was found that was written home by one of those British officers. And he wrote it the very next day while it was all still fresh in his mind. And in his letter, well, he paid tribute to our colonial Minuteman when he wrote, well, whoever looks upon them as an irregular mob will find himself very much mistaken. Nor are they void of a spirit of enthusiasm as we experienced yesterday. For many of them concealed themselves in houses to advance to within 10 yards to fire at me and other officers, though they were morally certain of being put to death themselves in an instant. Well, we beat the king once. If we had a leader, could we beat him again? Well, who are we going to get for a leader? Well, the best known military man at the time is George Washington. So we asked him, will you lead our army against the king? We want to vote. Well, Washington, well, he's for the cause, all right. But he knows there's no army out there. There's just a bunch of guys running around the woods with squirrel guns and pitchforks. But he says, you know, I've made my fortune in America. I'll put up my very own money to train and outfit the first 1,000 men. And when they're ready to fight, I'll take command and we'll show the king. Well, that's what he did. But where's he going to get all these cannons and all these guns that it takes to fight a revolution? I mean, no one can get in to help us, you know, because the British, well, they got the biggest navy in the world. The whole East Coast is blockaded. But Washington, well, Washington, he knows a secret. He knows the British, well, they've got lots of cannons and lots of guns, but they're stored down in the Bahama Islands in the caves off the East Coast, because they know we can't go there because we're not allowed to own ships, right? So Washington's thinking, you know, if I could just borrow 2 ships from Carnival Cruise Lines, and well, you know he's not going to do that, right? I mean, they'd break down halfway there. Be no running water, the toilets would be overflowing, people hanging sheets off the side of the ship, it'd be a mess. But where's he going to get enough money so he could build 6 ships secretly? Well, he remembered something very important, because he had went out and married one of the richest women in North America. Nah, he married her before he needed the money, but I've seen her picture, and whew, she'd better have a lot of money, buddy. I'm sorry, Martha. But he asked her, will you help me? Because I need enough money so I could build 6 ships secretly. Well, you know she's going to help her husband. She gave him an American Express card, and off he went. Well, pretty soon he got those ships built, found sailors to sail them. Well, he's got to have a landing party, right? Someone's got to go ashore and do the dirty work when they get there, and he finds them too. Well, pretty soon they're ready to go, and all 6 of those ships are secretly sailing down the inland waterway. And all 6 of those ships, well, they're flying the pine tree flag. Well, that's a darn good name for this flag, right? But they called those ships Washington's cruisers. Heck, I think they should have called them Martha's cruisers, don't you? I mean, she paid for them, didn't she? The landing party, well, that's Colonel Christopher Gadsden's men. Well, they want to fly his flag from those ships too. And his flag looked like this. The Gadsden flag, which has become popular in the last several years. But these men got there safely. They went ashore, did in the British Guards, and took all these cannons and guns and brought them back to start our rebellion. But who were these guys, Colonel Christopher Gadsden's men? Well, if you follow them up through history just a couple more years, they will become the United States Marines. So the next time you hear from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, remember that it actually began on the beaches of the Bahamas under a rattlesnake flag. Well, now it's January 1776, and Washington's ready. So he mounts up and joins the Philadelphia Light Horse Troop. And they're going to escort him to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he's going to take command of the Continental Army of the Colonies. Now, the Philadelphia Light Horse Troop flag is still in the museum in Philadelphia. It's a gold silk flag with 13 blue and silver stripes painted over top of the king's colors that were in the corner. Maybe this is an omen of something to come. Well, these men, well, they got Washington safely to Cambridge, and when he arrived, there was 1,000 men waiting on their new commander to take command, and flying over their head was a flag no one had ever seen before. It's in the history books, and it's called the Grand Union Flag. But where did this idea come from? Well, as I told you earlier in this point in our history, well, we thought we were English, part of Mother England and proud of it. But boy, are we mad at the king over the tax. And to show the king just how mad we are, someone had the nerve to take one of the king's flags, the British Red Ensign. Remember, I showed it earlier. They had the nerve to take one of his flags, and they sewed 6 white strips of cloth to show that the colonies are united into the stripes and separate from the king's colors in the corner. And we went to war under the Grand Union flag. Well, we won a few battles, but we lost a whole lot more. But the first thing you know, summer's coming on. More people are joining the Sons of Liberty now, and there's calls for freedom and independence. And on the 4th of July, 1776, we declared our independence. But now we're a new nation. Boy, we've got to win this war. Would you believe if we hadn't have won, all of our heroes and patriots could have been jailed or executed for treason? So nobody wanted to fly this flag anymore. So we fought on for almost a year without a flag. Then, in 1777, Congress decided, here we are, we're a new country. We're putting ships to sea, we're trading, we're fighting a war. We have to have identification. We've got to have a flag. So, on June 14th, that's the day we still celebrate as Flag Day, Congress passed the first flag resolution. And it was just a simple paragraph. All it said was, resolved, the flag of the United States shall be 13 alternate red and white stripes and 13 white stars in a blue field, representing a new constellation. Well, that's all they said. No artwork, no drawings, no samples, just words. And in 1777, there are no flag factories. All these flags are made by individual seamstresses. Every village, every hamlet, every army unit, every ship had their own seamstresses. And the words went out describing the new flag. Make the new flag of the United States of America. Oh boy. Well, you see, there were no two flags alike. That's where my father got the title, The Many Faces of Old Glory, and here they come. One of the first examples takes place in a little town we call Bennington, Vermont today. But back in these days, it was still Bennington, New York. And the colonel of the Bennington militia is Colonel John Stark. Well, he's about to go to war against the king when his wife says, well, John, if you're going to fight for your country, you got to have your country's flag. So she's going to make her husband's flag. The one she made, of course, is in the history books, and it's called the Bennington Flag, named after her husband's Bennington militia. But where did she get the idea to put white stripes on the outside? Or for that matter, she has 7 points on the stars. Well, the historians tell us that about the only thing anyone could find in print about flag designs were in the rules of heraldry over in Europe and England that said something like, alternating colors of stripes should begin and end with white. Stars, they had to have 6 or more points to even be a star. Anything with 5 back in these days, they didn't call them stars. They called them rowels or spurs, and Congress had said star. So to her, that meant 6 or more. And as you could see, she figured her husband was worth 7. Well, he took his wife's flag, he run it up the pole, gathered his men around, and in a quote from the history books, Colonel Stark says, men, we're going up against the king's army, and we're either going to win or my wife will be a widow. Man, I'm glad I wasn't in this guy's outfit, because all of a sudden the battle began. And right away he could see he wasn't going to win the Battle of Bennington. No, the British General Burgoyne, he was going to win. But then, suddenly over in the hills, they could hear cannons roaring, guns are crackling, men are starting to shout that there's someone coming to our rescue. But he's so far away he can't see him. So he tells the sergeant to get out the long glass. Well, the sergeant gets out the long glass. He says, "Who's coming to our rescue, Sergeant?" "Well, I'll tell you one thing, Pilgrim. That's not Bernie Sanders. But they got a strange flag like I've never seen before." A strange flag like they've never seen before. Well, could it possibly have been the Caped Crusader? I had a school kid stand up one time and said, "Hey, now wait a minute, mister, Batman wasn't even born yet." But then they shouted, "But they've got a green flag, and it's got 13 rowels on it." Colonel Stark says, if that's a green flag, well, that's got to be Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys are coming to our rescue. Come they did. Ethan Allen had captured Fort Ticonderoga from the British at Lake Champlain, and he dragged those cannons across the mountains, and he saved Colonel Stark at the Battle of Bennington, flying their green flag. Well, this isn't such a dumb idea, you know. I mean, these guys, they're fighting in the woods, crawling around the weeds, hiding in the tall grasses. Do you want to go around dragging a red and white striped flag doing that? 5 points on the stars. One of the very first flags in our history books with 5. Nobody knows who made this. One of these woodsy guys, well, he didn't know anything about heraldry rules. But boy, could they fight. They'd already been through the Battle of Bunker Hill. But unfortunately, well, Ethan Allen, he was captured later by the British, and he spent the rest of the Revolution in jail over in England. But when the war was over, they let him out, and he came back home to the land of opportunity. Is that the guy that started that furniture factory? I'm not sure about that one, but what happened to Colonel Stark? You know, his wife, she didn't become a widow that day or the next. In fact, he became a general, and he outlived them all. He was the oldest surviving general of the Revolution. So Congress, well, they gave him a gift. It was a section of land, but it was in a place so awful. It was so terrible, they had to give it away. Now, where was this terrible, awful place? Ohio, where I'm from. Well, they call his section of land Stark County now. So the next time, if you're ever up in Canton, Ohio, or around the Pro Football Hall of Fame, well, that's Stark County. They remembered his wife that made his flag for him, too. In fact, they named a hospital after her. She's in the history books, Molly Stark. Well, if that's not Paul Harvey and the rest of the story, well, I don't know what is. You know, history's exciting when you hear about these guys. Well, a little while ago, we had beat General Burgoyne at the Battle of Bennington, but he got away from us. Then he ran right into the Battle of Saratoga. We beat him there too. In fact, we captured him. And when the French found out that we had captured this great general, they said, you know, maybe these crazy Americans can win their revolution. So let's give them some help. So, among other things, they gave us some ships. We put cannons on them, found volunteer sailors, and put a man in charge, John Paul Jones. Well, John Paul Jones is getting these ships outfitted. Meanwhile, he ordered a flag of the United States made by a local seamstress. He decided to name his flagship the Bonhomme Richard to honor an old friend of his, Benjamin Franklin, who of course had published Poor Richard's Almanac. Well, pretty soon he got those ships built, took that flag, run it up the rings, and proudly set sail as the United States Navy under a flag known in the history books as the Bonhomme Richard flag. But it only has 12 stars. Heck, I thought we had 13 states. Well, historians tell us communications are so bad back in these days that John Paul Jones could never find out whether Georgia had joined the revolution yet or not, because Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet. Well, so he went to sea under a 12-star flag. Now here he is at sea, looking for a squadron of warships, a British fighting force, and he finds them off the east coast of Scotland in the North Sea at a place called Firth of Forth. Well, they're moving in on each other, you know. They're getting closer and closer. They're sizing each other up, when all of a sudden the British sailors fired a cannon shot, and it hits the Bonhomme Richard right at the waterline. Boy, she's taking on water now. That started this sea battle. And this sea battle lasted for over 6 hours. Well, John Paul Jones has got to do something, right? His ship's sinking right out from under him. And he looked over at the British warship. He shot their mast away. They're stopped dead in the water. And all the sailors are so tired from the fight, they're not going to last much longer. Now, you're not going to believe what happens next. But up comes Brian Williams from NBC. What? He's in all the wars, isn't he? So Brian Williams asked him, he says, John Paul, he says, what do you think you're going to do now? Well, John Paul Jones looked at him and uttered his famous words, I have not yet begun to fight. And with those words, he ordered every yard of canvas he could get up into his rigging, and he sailed his sinking ship as fast as she could go right into the side of the British warship, tied up the crew, and captured the ship. But he had to cut the Bonhomme Richard loose because she's going down fast. And he watched his ship float away and sink to the bottom of the ocean. And his colors went with her. Well, now here he is, stopped dead in the water on a captured British warship with no flag. Well, he's got to get out of there, right? So they jerry-rigged the mast back up, got enough canvas into the air, and they sail into the nearby neutral Dutch port of Texel. And they dropped anchor. Well, they're frantically working on this shot-up British warship, trying to get her seaworthy again, when John Paul Jones orders the boat lowered. They row him into port. Probably looked up the harbor master, and maybe it went something like this. Sir, my name is John Paul Jones of the United States Navy. We've got this captured British warship in the harbor here, trying to get her seaworthy again. We want to go home, but we can't sail. We lost our flag. You see, back in these days, you really shouldn't sail without a flag, or everybody figured you was a pirate. So he asked this Dutchman, does anyone here know what my new country's flag looks like? Well, would you believe that Dutchman had a drawing of the flag of the United States? Well, where in the world did this drawing come from? Well, historians tell us that previous to this, our ambassador to France, who happened to be Benjamin Franklin, was in the French Parliament one day, and maybe it went like this. Monsieur, you are a new country in the world. You're putting ships to sea. You're trading. You're fighting a war. Could you describe your country's new flags to the Courthouse here? We'll make the sketches. We'll send them to the nearby ports. Then we can recognize your ships at sea. Well, Ben thinks, well, that's a darn good idea. So he's thinking back to the day they passed the first flag resolution. Remember, I recited it to you earlier, described the flag in detail. So old Ben, he tells the court artist all about it. They make the drawings. They send them around to the nearby ports. John Paul Jones got one of those drawings in the port of Texel, had a local seamstress make the flag, quickly went back to the captured warship and run it up the riggings and proudly set sail for home under what he thought was the official flag of the United States, according to Benjamin Franklin. Small problem though, you see. Historians think that old Ben was asleep the day they passed that resolution. Oh, I tell school kids, see what happens if you don't pay attention in class? Most amazing part of this story is John Paul Jones got home safe under this. Heck, I'm surprised the British, the Americans, the Huguenots, and everybody else wasn't shooting at this one. Well, now he's a hero. So they're going to build him a new flagship called the Alliance. When the ladies of Portsmouth, where they're building the ship, well, they're going to make him the official flag because, well, they don't want him to go to sea with this one. The one they made is named after his flagship, and it's called the Alliance flag. Well, here we have heraldry rules again. The white stripes are back on the outside. We're up to 8 points on the stars now. Well, you know the rules. 6 or more points. 1 flag, 1 ship, 1 group of seamstresses. There were no 2 flags alike. Deep in the South, one of the worst battles of the entire Revolution takes place in a little town. You go through your whole life and never hear of it. Unfortunately, we lost that battle. But while we were losing it, we beat up Cornwallis's British army so bad they never recovered. And by the time they got to the Battle of Yorktown, well, there just wasn't enough fight left. And Cornwallis surrendered the British army, and the revolution was over. The beginning of the end of the British Army began in the little town of Guilford Courthouse, North Carolina. And those good old boys, well, they fought for liberty under their stars and stripes too. But you see, they have a little problem. The historians think, well, they heard that resolution with different ears than we did. Oh, the Guilford Courthouse flag. What a flag, huh? The original Guilford Courthouse flag hangs in a museum in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, and is considered to be a relic of one of the worst battles of the entire Revolution. Easton, Pennsylvania. You know, we hid the Liberty Bell there on its way to Allentown so the British wouldn't find it. Well, the ladies of Easton's going to make the flag, but what are they going to make? Well, remember the resolution. 13 alternate red and white stripes and 13 white stars in a blue field. What is so complicated about all this? Well, the ladies of Easton says, well, it's not complicated at all. They say, we know exactly what Congress means. You know, just like we do today, right? So, the ladies of Easton says, according to Congress, this is the official flag of the United States. Well, now wait a minute, let's go over it again. 13 alternate red and white stripes. There they are. They didn't say where. And 13 white stars in a blue field. There they are, big as life. Now, technically, you could say this is about as correct as the one we fly today. Now, the original Easton flag hangs in a museum, but they still argue, though, was it in our rebellion or the War of 1812? Well, about this time, George Washington hears about all this. You know, here we are. We're a new country. We're putting ships to sea. We're trading. We're fighting a war. We're trying to get a little respect in the world. And we can't even make 2 flags that look alike? So he and a couple congressmen are going to get together and get that first official flag made right. Because none of these are. Well, here's where those historians reach that fork in the road. Who made it? Well, a lot of them want to give the honor to a congressman from New Jersey, Francis Hopkinson, because to this day, they still have the bill that he turned in for the design of the Great Seal of the United States and one flag. But unfortunately for Mr. Hopkinson, his flag didn't survive or any drawings or descriptions. And besides that, there's no proof that he was ever paid. So that leaves the other historians. Well, they want to give this great honor to a professional flag maker from Philadelphia, Betsy Ross. Well, she was paid. They've got her paid receipts for federal flags for the government. But unfortunately, none of her drawings or descriptions or samples survived either. So we can't prove for sure who made that first official flag, but the legend of Betsy Ross lives on. Now, can you imagine the President of the United States and those two congressmen in her tiny living room where they're discussing all these flags you've seen? Well, the men, they don't like the ones with the heraldry rules, with the white stripes on the outside. Because they say out on a bright sunshiny day, especially out at sea, well, those white stripes blend in with the bright sky in the background. Looks like there's only 11 stripes. Looks like the flag's smaller. So the men says, we're going to ignore the rules of heraldry, and we're going to put the red stripes on the outside. Then, according to the legend, Betsy Ross says, well, gentlemen, if you're going to change the stripes, could I please do something about the stars? What's wrong with the stars, they said. She goes, well, the ladies that are making them are using 6, 8, 9, 11, 13 points. They're all different shapes and sizes. They're crooked and they're hard to make. But gentlemen, with your permission, of course, I would like to use a 5-pointed star because I can cut a perfect one with just one cut of the scissors. Well, that means she can make flags faster. And everyone knows, right, that when you work for the federal government, you have to be efficient, right? Yeah, you know, my dad told that same joke to a group of retirees from the Pentagon. Let's just say they didn't even snicker at that one. But can you imagine how nervous Betsy Ross is with the President of the United States in her living room? Now, if you folks went home tonight and you found a strange guy in your living room, and he had on tight robin egg blue satin pantaloons, and he's got a cape, powdered wig, buckles on their shoes, a silk shirt, and a linen handkerchief, well, you would swear this was Elton John, wouldn't you? Now, she's going to make one cut, and I sure hope I did this right, because I only have the one piece of paper. I don't hear anybody breathing. Yeah. Well, gee whiz. Look at that. You got to applaud for that, right? So, according to the legend of Betsy Ross, that's how we got that first official flag. But you see, there's something wrong already because there's more than one version. Now, this is called the Betsy Ross flag, the one we all know and love and grew up with those 13 white stars in a circle. But historians tell us, well, most of those early flags, those 13 white stars were in straight staggered lines, just like they are today. But this one is official, and she should be treated as such. The first one, the Betsy Ross. Well, now it's 1780, and the governor of Massachusetts, John Hancock, awards the Black Massachusetts Company their flag. Now, their flag was called the Bucks of America. These were freed black slaves that fought valiantly in our revolution. These guys gained the attention of the governor and the president, and they were heroes in every sense of the word, and way too little attention is given to them in our history books for fighting on the side of freedom. Well, we won that war, in case you all had missed history class that day. But the king says, well, you didn't win anything. He's still stopping our ships at sea, kidnapping our sailors, and we're getting madder by the minute. But we took in 2 more states. Now we're up to 15. Flag's wrong already. So Congress passed another resolution, pretty much the same as the first, just changed the numbers. 15 stars, 15 stripes. Then we got into the War of 1812 with King George again. And this is what it looked like when Francis Scott Key looked out the porthole with the rockets, red glare, and the bombs bursting in air, and wrote our national anthem. Well, that's why we call this the Star-Spangled Banner Flag. And the reason he could see it at night, well, it was flying over Fort McHenry and was the largest battle flag ever flown, 30 by 42 feet. The original Star-Spangled Banner Flag is at the Smithsonian today, totally restored, so your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and their great-grandchildren can go see this jewel of America. Well, we won that war too, but we took in 5 more states while we were fighting it. Now we're up to 20. What's Congress going to do? Are they going to keep doing the same thing? 20 stars, 20 stripes. You know, if they'd have kept that up, our 50-star flag that we fly today would have 50 stripes in a lapel pin. Well, they knew they were in trouble. So in 1818, Congress passed the 3rd flag resolution. Resolved, the flag of the United States shall be 13 alternate red and white stripes to honor the original 13 states, and 1 star for every state thereafter. Well, that's how we got back to 13 stripes. The Star-Spangled Banner Flag is the only official flag that didn't have 13 stripes. Now, what did that 20-star flag look like in 1818? Well, a lot of them look like this. The Great Star Flag, obviously, but there were others. And as we came up through the years and we added more states and more stars to the blue field, there were other great star designs, but this was the first one, the 20-star. There have been 27 official flags of the United States, beginning with Betsy Ross, right on up through these to the 50-star flag we fly today, which became official on the 4th of July, 1960. Now, the stories you have heard this afternoon have invested our flag with much historical meaning. But it's up to each person of every generation to understand and appropriate the meaning of the flag for themselves. President Woodrow Wilson once wrote, "This flag which we honor and under which we serve is the emblem of our power and thought and purpose as a nation. It has no other character than that which we give it from generation to generation. The choices are ours. When our great banner of freedom was first raised, hopes and dreams were high for a perfect union. While our forefathers, they fought and died for the principles of the Bill of Rights. They believed those benefits would come to all future generations of Americans. The flag they raised that day, it was pure and proud with no past, only a future to be built on those same foundations. The soft breezes of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that caressed their flag that April's day still exists, but unfortunately, maybe not for all Americans, with all the benefits that we enjoy as Americans. Well, there are also obligations. Oh, you may be born an American, which is one thing, but to be an American, it's quite another. Well, we must continue to build on these same foundations, not only as a nation, but as individuals working together to create that perfect union with liberty and justice for all. And so to all the young men and women who have ever served or who are serving the cause of freedom around the world, if you ever had any doubts as to why, I give you this.
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
Yeah! Yeah! Lauren Nelson, everyone. Everyone for coming out this beautiful day. Now don't go anywhere yet, we're not quite done. But I want to thank the Military Officers Association of Sarasota for bringing me down here, Brian McCarthy, and Dr. Robin Bell and your great Pops Orchestra. And as a quick commercial, 5 years ago this was on DVD, and it is available outside the grounds out here if you leave. My wife is out there. They're only $10, but this is what you just saw available on DVD. And I want to thank everyone. God bless you. God bless America. And God bless the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Vane. Let's have one more round of applause for the Pops Orchestra. Today, we also observe the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. We reflect with solemn reverence upon the valor of a generation that served with honor. We pay tribute to the 3 million servicemen and women who left their families to serve bravely. a world away from everything they knew and everyone they loved. From Ia Drang Valley to Khe Sanh, from Hue to Saigon, and countless villages in between, they pushed through jungles and rice paddies, heat and monsoon, fighting heroically to protect the ideals we hold dear as Americans. Through more than a decade of combat, over air, land, and sea, these proud Americans upheld the highest traditions of our armed forces. As a grateful nation, we honor more than 58,000 patriots, their names etched in the black granite, who sacrificed all they had and all they would ever know. It is estimated that less than 500,000 of those who served in Vietnam are alive today. Every day, 390 combat veterans serving in Vietnam leave us. The young of us now is 65 years old. Today, we also honor the over 4,000 Vietnam veterans who are interred here at the Sarasota National Cemetery. We draw inspiration from the heroes who suffered unspeakably as prisoners of war, yet who returned home with their heads held high. We pledge to keep faith with those who were wounded and still carry the scars of war, seen and unseen. With more than 1,600 of our service members still among the missing, we pledge as a nation to do everything in our power to bring these patriots home. In the reflection of the wall, we see the military family members and veterans who carry a pain that may never fade. May they find peace in knowing their loved ones endure, not only in medals and memories, but in the hearts of all Americans who are forever grateful for their service, valor, and sacrifice. In recognition of a chapter in our nation's history that must never be forgotten, let us renew our sacred commitment to those 9 million Americans who served on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces during the Vietnam War, approximately 7 million of which are living today. Let us recognize the families who awaited the safe return of those deployed and the contribution made on the home front by our families during the Vietnam era. May I ask all those who have worn or are wearing our nation's cloth to please stand and be recognized for your service to our nation. Thank you for your service. I have asked 2 of my friends, Brigadier General Scott Westhoff, United States Air Force, and Colonel Bobby Fernander, United States Army, to award the Vietnam Veteran Lapel Pin to all those that served during the period November 1st, 1955 through May 15th, 1975. Brigadier General Westhoff began his flying career as part of the Strategic Air Command. He commanded at the squadron, group, and wing level, including his time at Dover Air Force Base, Delaware, during 9/11. He held assignments at Headquarters Air Mobility Command, Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, Headquarters U.S. Air Force, and on the Joint Staff. He was the command pilot for over 4,000 flying hours. He is also a past vice president of the Military Officers Association. Colonel Bobby Fernander, United States Army, was a company commander in Korea and then the assault helicopter commander of the 1st Aviation Brigade and then the commander of the 101st Assault Helicopter Battalion in Vietnam. Bobby has over 3,800 flight hours and been awarded the Silver Star, 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 2 Bronze Stars, 30 Air Medals, and the Purple Heart. We were honored to have him as our president of our MOA chapter in 1988. So all those veterans eligible to receive a Vietnam lapel pin, I ask that you come forward to the center here. Please come forward, all those who served during the Vietnam period. Don't be shy. It took your applause to bring them forward. If you refer to your program, there is an image of the lapel pin. The Vietnam veteran lapel pin symbolizes the weight of importance represented in each element of this lasting memento of the nation's thanks to all Vietnam veterans. The eagle represents courage, honor, and dedicated service to our nation as one of the most recognizable and notable American symbols. It is emblazoned with distinction on numerous military insignia. The blue circle, the color matches the canton of the American flag and signifies vigilance, perseverance, and justice. The circle shape and blue color also match the official seal of the commemoration. The laurel wreath is a time-honored symbol representing victory, integrity, and strength. The stripes behind the eagle represent the American flag. Stars, the 6 stars represents the 6 allies who served, sacrificed, and fought alongside one another. They were Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, the Republic of Korea, Thailand, and of course the United States. The message embossed on the back states, "A grateful nation thanks and honors you," and is closest to the heart of the wearer. Also, the official name of the commemoration is included to remind each veteran that this is a national initiative, and the lapel pin is the nation's lasting memento of thanks. As we conclude the Vietnam War commemoration, let me wish my fellow patriots fair winds and following scenes. I remind everyone that our 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, is available at the east entrance for pictures. Vane Scott is also available for pictures at the front of the stage. Copies of the Many Faces of Old Glory are available. Ask Vane how you can receive a copy. This concludes Celebrating the Stars and Stripes performance. Thank you to all those that made this event possible and for your attendance here this afternoon. Be safe on your way home, and God bless America.